Time having arrived and also passed, I call the Regulated Industries Committee to order. Welcome everybody here today. I know if you have not signed up, don't want to talk about any of these bills that we've got, the sign-up sheet is up front. Before we take any action, we got a bill pending possibly next week, and we've got a person that would like to testify, and we're not going to take any action on it, but he's made a long trip to get here, and his name is Mr. Bob Fromm. He's senior instructor, FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, to talk about the Anti-Cigarette Smuggling Act. So at this time, I will recognize Mr. Fromm to come up and go to the microphone, please, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to address the committee today, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bob Fromm. I've spent the better part of the last 10 years doing nothing but working counterfeit tobacco diversion cases. I was involved in a case called Operation Smokescreen out of Charlotte, North Carolina, where we identified 25 members of a Hezbollah terrorist cell who were involved in cigarette smuggling and diversion, as it's called today. Can I say that the state of Georgia has that same problem? I think they have a problem. Whether we can tie it to Hezbollah, I can't say that. But it is one of the main sources of funding for terrorists today in tobacco diversion. The way it works like this is they will buy the cigarettes here, and then they will divert those cigarettes to a higher tax state. As an example, a carton of cigarettes in Georgia right now I think sells for about $35. That same carton of cigarettes in New York City sells for $77. That same carton of cigarettes in Dearborn, Michigan sells for $65. So there's a tremendous amount of money to be made there. Our terrorist cell was averaging on the daily basis of $39,000 a day profit. How are we going to address this? Currently, the state of Georgia does not have a way to accurately identify counterfeit tax stamps other than if you take a pack of cigarettes off the store shelf, you send it to the lab, that might take 3-4 weeks for it to get back. Under a new system that's being proposed, the investigator or the Department of Revenue investigator can go in. They have a handheld device, point it right at the pack of cigarettes. It'll tell them immediately whether that is counterfeit or whether it's real. Part of the problem is this, is that in China, there are 22 cigarette manufacturing plants. Of those 22, the Chinese Red Army operates 11 of those. If you were to go and buy a tractor-trailer load of Marlboro cigarettes today, it would cost you approximately $2.2 million. That same counterfeit tractor-trailer load coming from China would cost you $250,000, and it will come with a counterfeit tax stamp already on it. So the opportunity to make just millions of dollars is there, and it needs to be addressed. I teach this exact course to every new agent training class at the FBI Academy. I teach for ATF in Brunswick, Georgia. I teach every new agent training class on the ins and outs of tobacco diversion and counterfeit tax stamps. And I'll open it up for any questions that you gentlemen, ladies may have.
Anyone on the committee have any questions? Okay. Appreciate you coming down. It's something we'll probably consider next week, but give you this opportunity to give us a kind of one-ups on what the danger of this is and the magnitude of it. So I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Lewis, you're the author of this bill. You may want to comment. No action is going to be taken on it, but we'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'll be very brief, and I'll thank you for allowing this opportunity here. This bill is simply an attempt to do what the bill says, is to try and stop cigarette smuggling in the state as much as possible. This bill is not intended in any way to raise any tax or fee any more than it already is. And it's also not intended to put any undue burden on the wholesalers or manufacturers in this state. And we're going to be working through that system, so I just want to let the committee know and our audience know that that's the complete intention. It's only to stop cigarette smuggling in this state. We think that some of the new technology that is available that can be applied can go a long way in preventing that, and look forward to when this committee does have a hearing on the legislation so we can talk through that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? I think you available for questions? Okay.
I'll try.
Representative Freeman.
Mr. Chairman, I got a bill on your committee, you know. No, I'm kidding. Just some friendly questions. I had a chance to meet with the gentleman from the FBI earlier today, and appreciate him coming by and seeing me. When we do have the hearing, I hope that you can bring somebody from Georgia that can help better identify the problem. And I know that y'all are working on doing that. Just would encourage that to help pass the legislation along. I also would ask how much this is going to cost and who is going to bear the cost of bringing in the new equipment.
Fair question. We'll try to have those answers ready for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, your bill has been assigned to subcommittee.
Thank you.
Let's get all this humor out because we need it after a while. Thank you, Representative Lewis, and probably next week we'll bring that bill up and discuss it further. Appreciate you coming up. Okay, down the list we go. The first bill we're going to talk about is House Bill 798 by Representative Austin Scott. You're recognized to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I bring you a bill that is much scaled back from the original bill that we presented to you. I do personally believe that transparency is good for the consumer in health care. This bill, though, simply gets to the licensure of pharmacy benefit managers. They would be licensed in much the same way as third-party administrators are, and that is essentially what we did is pull the laws and all with regard to third-party administrators and would require pharmacy benefit managers to be licensed and have some of those similar provisions to it. I want to go back to one of the first things I said when we made the initial presentation to the committee. As an insurance agent, I have to have a license. My office has to have a license. A doctor has to have a license. The doctor's office has to have a license. The insurance company has to have a license. The pharmacy has to have a license. The pharmacist has to have a license. All the way through the healthcare chain, whether it be in the insurance product or the delivery of health care, everybody has to have a license other than the pharmacy benefit manager, and they are the one that essentially dictate the drug that you get to take. Now, they'll take issue with that statement, and if you want to take it literally, I guess they get to dictate which drug you get at which price. But as you know, with the cost of pharmaceuticals, if there is no reimbursement or anything from a third party, then it's difficult for the majority of our citizens to purchase those drugs. I appreciate the indulgence of the committee in working with us on this bill, and again, it has been scaled back quite simply to the licensure aspect of pharmacy benefit managers at this stage.
Got one question, Representative Bearden, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure, because I came in late to subcommittee and it was a one-page bill. Now I'm looking at LC 332485S. Is that the new one we're working on?
That's correct. And what happened, and I apologize for this, we said that we were going to take it back just to licensure. Legislative Council ran into a time constraint on having the other aspects of the bill completed, and so what we've done now is go back and address the issues that Legislative Council here suggested, and that you could not pass the bill without some of the rules and regs and identifying criteria being in the licensure process.
So these 3 pages just deal with licensing issues only?
It is licensure, and my understanding is that these rules are consistent with the rules for third-party administrators, and there are no contract measures in there that open up their contracts for inspection or anything along those lines.
Okay. Thank you.
we had, this bill was appointed a subcommittee with the chairmanship of Representative Tumlin, and I'm going to ask him to report on the subcommittee findings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill passed out of here unanimous the other day, and it primarily dealt with, we took the original bill, had a bill substitute, and it dealt with that the commissioner, which would be the Commissioner of Insurance and Fire and Safety, I believe is the full name, can promulgate rules and regulations, and we took this under advisement because there had to be, I guess, some criteria set in it, and I think they addressed it well from what's been added from filing fees have to be done, that a license can be refused or not, or turned down, or it has to be issued by the commissioner, and also that things like in pharmacy benefit manager license may not be sold, transferred to a non-qualified. So these are normal type things that are in most of what our regulated industries have. So, and it talks about the ability that, according to the rules set by the pharmacists, that they can assess a penalty or fine against the entity when they're out of harmony with the rules. So, like I say, we brought this forward to the full committee with a positive recommendation.
Okay. You've heard the report of the subcommittee. What is the desire of the committee? It's open for a motion. Hear a motion and do pass. I hear a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the bill? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Bill goes out with a do pass recommendation. Representative Stevens, which bill would you prefer to address first? Okay, House Bill 393 by Representative Stevens. If you'll make a presentation, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, House Bill 393, if it looks familiar to, is almost the identical bill that we passed 3 or 4 years ago. What this bill did at the time, whenever it made it to the governor's office, is it picked up some baggage along the way that made the Department of Revenue a little bit uncomfortable about the way to track the revenue by opening up farm wineries to some of these festivals around the state. And of course, and that was a valid argument by the department, and of course it didn't make it by the governor's veto pen. So if I can, Mr. Chairman, I'll just explain a little bit of the objectives. And what it does, it makes farm winery law compliant with the 2005 United States Supreme Court ruling in Granholm versus Herald. It provides marketing opportunities for the Georgia farm wines by liberalizing what can be sold in their tasting rooms. The substitute does not address in any way the shipping, which is in the next bill that I'll ask for and we'll go to next. Section 1, if I may, Mr. Chairman, you want me to go through the bill short?
Yeah.
Section 1 redefines a farm winery as a winery located anywhere that uses native agricultural products from its state of domicile to make at least 40% of its annual production. The self-distribution provision, which now applies only to Georgia wineries, will be expanded to include any farm wine in the country that meets the requirements of the law. This will satisfy the requirements of the Granholm case, and we'll bypass those and move on. Section 2 is regards the tasting rooms. The Georgia farm wineries will still be permitted to operate their tasting rooms and their winery premises in at least 5 additional locations. These tasting rooms serve as an additional outlet for the promotion of their product and for the products of other farm wineries. The committee substitute will make one small change in the current law. It will permit farm wineries to sell non-farm wine, beer, and distilled spirits in their tasting rooms, but only where these products are allowed by local statute and local law. Under the current present law, the farm winery must open separate facility to sell these products. This will not in any way override any local law. Section 3 repeals the phase-in production as scheduled that was created for the Georgia wineries. Again, this is to comply with the Supreme Court decision. And why is this bill important? Regardless of how you feel about 1061, which we'll talk about in just a minute, the bill is necessary to protect Georgia farm lawsuits from occurring all over the country. Over 20 states have filed such suits at this point, attacking discriminatory wine laws in the aftermath of the Granholm case. The Revenue Department supports this bill, as well as the Georgia wine distributors. And ladies and gentlemen, again, this is a bill that you've seen before, and I certainly hope you'll give it a unanimous support and pass it out of this committee.
Okay, you've heard the presentation. Do I have any questions? What number are you? Okay. Representative Von Epps.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing changes as far as that goes at all. And again, the definition to distribute these wines is up to 24,000 gallons a year of a small farm winery. This satisfies the Department of Revenue's ability to track the revenue, but it also satisfies the Granholm argument for discriminatory selling of wine within state and without, which is the Supreme Court case.
Thank you, Representative Stevens. I'm just as to Granholm, I'm just trying to figure on page 2, line 1, with a winery from another state, so they could afford the same opportunity that an in-state could. Would they have to actually set up a location here in Georgia?
No, not at all. Wait a minute, let me see, what page are we on? I think I'm reading the wrong line in the wrong
Page
bill.
2, line 4. I think you're talking about.
Right, and that's, said is located on a premise, a substantial portion of which is used for agriculture. So,
what this is doing is setting up a definition for what is a farm winery, where at least 40% of their annual production is there. So, if they had to set up a wine from outside the state, for example, somebody wanted to have a taste room, yeah, they've got to go through the same thing that we do.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, they would literally have to actually set up a small.
No, that's not what I'm misunderstanding your question, I think. All that line 1, page 4 does is just defines what a farm winery is, and 40% of that production can be not necessarily within the state of Georgia, but within another state.
That's where I was confused. You help me. Yeah, they could set up a tasting room, but it wouldn't have to be on the fine winery. It could be in a storefront location,
right?
As long as they met the definition of a fine
and fit the
of a wine
and the local law, of course, the local ordinance is there.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? I want to commend the people that's worked on this. It's been a long, hard struggle for a lot of people, and I appreciate Representative Stevens working on it, and the people. I won't call any names out in the audience that are here that are concerned with it, but I think this is an industry that's growing in Georgia and certainly need to be recognized, and I think this bill will go a long way toward recognizing it. I'm open for a motion. Motion made, do pass. Second. Did I hear a second? Okay. Passed and, excuse me. Any further discussion? You want to talk? Okay. No? All right. All those in favor of House Bill 393 by committee substitute, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Okay, 393 goes out with a do pass recommendation. Okay. The committee substitute to House Bill 1061.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, committee. House Bill 1061 is the bill that required most of the work as we tried to get around some of this Supreme Court case. The House Bill 1061 has several objectives. Number one, to bring the Georgia wine shipping laws into compliance with recent federal court decisions followed the U.S. Supreme Court Granholm case. And what that specific case does is it says that states cannot discriminate against wineries if wineries ship within the state, and states have to allow essentially those same shipments from without. To place and the second thing it does is place Georgia farm wineries on an equal footing with out-of-state wineries and shipping wine to Georgia consumers. Georgia wineries are presently prohibited from shipping wine to Georgia consumers unless the specific wine is bought in person at the winery, then shipped to the purchaser's home. The bill would enable the farm wineries to purchase the same Georgia wine shipping license as is available to an out-of-state winery. The third thing it does, it increases the number to 12 cases that can be shipped to Georgia household each year and remove the limit of the number of cases a winery can ship to Georgia. At present, a winery can only ship 50 cases to Georgia each year pursuant to the Georgia wine shipping license and is limited to 5 cases per household. The fourth thing it does, it removes the prohibition against issuing a Georgia wine shipping license to any winery which has a wine distributor in Georgia. And the fifth thing, it increases taxes collected in Georgia by requiring an agreement to pay wine taxes and to collect and pay Georgia sales taxes on the sales of Georgia households before the license can be issued to the winery. And it imposes additional procedures for assuring that the wine will be shipped only to adults. Since 1980, not breaking new ground in retailers, the wholesalers, let me scratch that, 37 other states have direct shipping laws, and there have been no revenue or underage issues with these states. Georgia has been demanding more consumer access. This bill corrects that. And this bill is a compromise of several different factions concerned. The Wine Institute, the Georgia Farm Wineries, the Georgia Wine and Spirit Wholesalers, Beer Wholesalers Association, Diego, and Publix Supermarkets. Ladies and gentlemen, that's essentially the meat and potatoes of the bill. It allows us finally, if we pass this bill, to ship wine directly from the winery to the consumer under limited circumstances.
Okay. Yield for questions. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing the bill. I first want to say I commend you for what you're trying to do is get a product to the consumer, and I think that's very admirable. I don't agree with some of the things that are in the bill, and I say that I agree with what you're trying to do, and I am going to vote for the bill. But I want to ask a few questions and see if you can help me along the way, or maybe I'm going to state a position, just rather you might not need to comment. But you said there's some provisions to prevent underage drinking. Can you talk to me about those and lay
Sure.
that out for me?
Those are on page 2, line 7. Starting with line 7, they shall verify the age of such a person placed in the order either by physical examination, which is what we had in the old law, that is, you present yourself to the winery, or an approved government issue form identification by utilizing the internet-based age verification system. That's done in all 37 other states that currently do that.
Is that system, I'm not familiar with that system. Does it work? You said it's not happening in other areas, but tell me how you get how you identify somebody's age through the computer.
I hadn't got a clue.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
I do know that this system works, and they've never had an issue in any of these 37 states where shipping wine to an underage person has been reported, as far as we know.
I buy stuff online, and all it says is put your age in there, but I've never had a verification of what my age was. And
I'll have to ask the department maybe to speak to that, but of course the Department of Revenue would approve whatever mechanism that is.
Another question I got is, can you talk about the three-tier system and how you feel this applies to the three-tier system.
Of course, that was been the crux of the argument whenever we started the wine shipping bill. The way that it works now, whenever you buy wine from most of us here, whenever we go to point of sale, we go to a grocery store or a package store to buy our wine. If the winery is a small wine, the wholesaler may not decide to stock that wine. And if the wholesaler doesn't stock it, generally you can't get it at the retail level. And generally it's these small wines that have a very unique flavor that it's hard for these wholesalers, because of their return mechanism and all the overhead that's involved, decide on their own not to sell it. This specific wine shipping bill is just a very small mechanism to allow those that can't get their wine from a wholesaler through to a retailer. It gives them a mechanism to get their wine distributed. I believe, and it's a personal belief, and you may or may not believe that this would also help the wholesaler at some point realize that the consumer wants this wine.
How would they get that information, Chairman?
And they then on their own contact the retailer, which then contacts the wholesaler to stock the wine. But if I may continue,
sorry.
But then there is a return mechanism in place, so that if there's a problem with the wine, if there's a return that needs to happen, there's a mechanism in place for the Department of Revenue to track the money. I don't believe it's going to affect the three-tier system at all.
You mentioned that it may help the wholesaler realize that there's a need for a product. How would they track the use of the product if you're going completely around them?
I'll give an example. Let's just say that I go to a winery in North Georgia, and there's a lot of good ones up there. And I pick out a wine, and I'm with my family that might have several relatives with me. We go in and we decide to buy a few bottles of wine. Once we get back to Savannah, the only mechanism that we've got is to go back to that winery to get it. If I decide to expand my, and of course I can sign up for that wine and have it sent to me. But if I go to that, call that winery and I say I'd like to get this to several people, once I share this with several people, the demand will send it to the retailer to demand to stock it in the wholesaler, because more people in my area for the first time have enjoyed it.
What if I don't want to go to the computer and I want the same wine you do, but I want somebody else to do the work for me? Why can't I get my retailer to order that wine?
You can. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
the retailer would have to get it from your wholesaler. The problem with going straight from the manufacturer or the winery to the retailer is the tracking mechanism again. The Department of Revenue brought this up. Is if it's the return mechanism and keeping up with the money.
I also admire you about your scenario that you described, because I think this is where it started. I'm not sure, but about helping Georgia wineries, and I think that's where you kind of started on this a couple years ago. But this bill, you can order from California wineries too, right?
Certainly.
And that's not the same scenario.
It's not the same scenario, but it gets us past this this Supreme Court case.
I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm going to vote for your bill. I think that we're going down a slippery slope, and I think it does affect the three-tier system. I think we have set laws and asked our local businesses, our retailers, to comply with these laws, and we've threatened them to take their beer license and alcohol licenses if they don't comply with those laws. And what we're doing is giving individuals the ability to go right around those laws that they've been complying with and paying taxes on and collecting taxes. I just got concerns, and I want you to know.
And I respectfully understand the concerns, but I would like to keep in mind these farm wineries that have no other mechanism. They can't get it on a local level. They can't get it through the wholesaler. They have no other mechanism to get this except through a direct shipment method. And I believe it will expand it again to place these small wineries on the shelves of the retail outlet by popular demand.
One final question. Later on down the road, Mr. Chairman, if you will, do you suspect that the retailers may get the same ability as what you're trying to do now? Would you have a problem with that?
If we can get the Department of Revenue to agree with that, that's and keep in mind, I've gone down this road before where if the Department of Revenue perceives that it's going to be a problem, I don't want a bill to be vetoed because there's a tracking mechanism not in place to keep the Department of Revenue whole. That's my concern.
Representative Bearden.
Thank you for bringing this. I may just need an education lesson here real quick. Talking about taxes. When we open this up, if they don't pay the tax to Georgia, is there a mechanism to shut it down or prevent them from shipping if we don't receive the taxes?
Absolutely.
Being on there now, I just know in Georgia if someone don't pay taxes in Georgia, we can shut them down that way.
There's a reciprocal agreement between the states whenever they ship between states that these taxes are collected.
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone's paying their fair share of taxes. Thank you.
Good question.
Representative Von Epps, you recognized.
Correct. Per year. Per person. Of combination of brands. Or in excess of 5 cases of wine of one brand of combination to any one consumer. This is strictly trying to help the something, and if it were to get larger than that, back to Representative Freeman's question, I believe that we might run into a problem with cracking this 3-tier system. We don't want to do that. We want to keep the wholesaler whole. We want to keep the retailer whole. This is only those cases in small quantities that will allow those consumers to buy something, a few cases of wine. And, you know, if it's more than 12 cases of wine per year, that's a lot of wine for consumer use. Yes. Yes, sir. Of one brand. If they fall under the definition of a farm winery, which is, again, where 40% of their grapes are produced in that state. So that's not a farm wine. Gallo is not a farm wine. Those things that you traditionally see at your retail outlet is not what this bill is intended to do. That's a very good question.
Give you one more crack at it, Representative Free. Took it all?
No, I think I have a question. Can you order Boone's Farm? Seriously. Does this say you can't?
I'm not so sure. Where's Boone's Farm made?
I have no idea.
I think they sell a lot of this stuff. This is what they call Ripple, I think, in some areas, and I think it's widely distributed even in the 7-Eleven stores. So no, you wouldn't. This shipping bill wouldn't apply to Boone's Farm.
It's aimed at the high-end consumer.
Or the boutique producer.
But is there prevention from you ordering any of these other things online?
Yeah, they don't fall under the definition of a farm winery.
Representative Turner.
Check my math. Here again, it's 12 cases. We were talking about a minute ago. You would basically, could 3 people use that up by January the 2nd?
Wow.
2 of them by 5 and 1 2, and then they'd be through for the year, right? I mean, it's a nominal impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nominal impact. You're right. If you've got a New Year's Year party or a 4th of July party, you could, if you so chose to give that. But I have a feeling it's like most of these people, they reserve these for, for a special time because it's unique.
Yeah. But I mean, that's why you're not really opening up the floodgate here.
No.
It's so limited. And can I ask you just one other part? Is case a well-defined term? Could somebody say my cases are 240 bottles? Or?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's 12, but I'll have to rely on the Department of Revenue or somebody to tell me what a case is.
If we made an amendment, could we make case a defined term and come up with a number, say, of 12 or whatever?
I'll accept that as an amendment if the farm winery's shipping follows what a case is.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think we've got somebody here can answer that. Fred, can you answer the standard case size and amount? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We, Mike, I don't want to put you on the spot. Revenue has worked with everybody on this bill. I don't know of any bills that have been worked on and tried to get everybody on board with it than these two bills have. Can you speak for revenue? Are y'all comfortable with this, what we've got going? Let me recognize. Come on. You got here just in time. If you'll take the stand and I just asked a question. I know revenue has been involved in this, and I don't want y'all to have a lot of heartburn about it. So could you just comment basically your all's finding and feeling about this bill?
New stamps.
No, I'm sorry. This is from the House Bill 1061 on the farm winery bill.
Shipping wine.
Shipping wine.
We don't have any. I don't believe we have any issues with that.
Good. Okay. Okay. All right. Hold it. Okay, I'm gonna allow you one question, and that's going to end that.
Can I ask a question of the Revenue Department? I understand that y'all have gone back and forth on this bill and worked with the author, and I appreciate you doing that. My one question is, for the members of this committee and for my own benefit, would you describe the three-tier system as shortly, as quickly as possible, and what you think this bill does to it?
Basically, the three-tier system is you have your manufacturers, your importers, and brokers. You're on the top tier. And your middle tier is your wholesalers, and your bottom tier is your retailer. The retailer needs any alcohol, they go through the wholesaler, and the wholesaler goes through the manufacturer. The retailer is not allowed to go around the wholesaler to go to the manufacturer to set prices, obtain products, and so forth like that.
And what do you think this bill has affected that?
Really, I remember the bill, but I'm not real specific about it. I hadn't seen it in a couple of days. So I know there's several bills about the shipping, and
this is cutting out that system. So I mean, I want to know if the department supports the three-tier system.
Yes, sir. The department supports the three-tier system.
This bill cuts that out.
Okay. Well, I was wrong in my first response.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, and I don't know that that's the case, but we're going to leave it as is, and thank you for coming back up.
Right.
We have someone that'd like to make a presentation. Mr. Ed McGill, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I wouldn't call what I'm about to say as a presentation, but I would like an opportunity to make some very brief remarks to you today. I'm Ed McGill, Executive Director of the Georgia Alcohol Dealers Association, and that membership represents a majority of all the packaged liquor stores throughout the state of Georgia, and all of those folks are retail wine licensees. My brief remarks today will only address this bill, 1061, and of course the other bill you passed out, we had no problem with that, 393. I primarily today want to thank our chairman, who during a meeting with all parties earlier this month instructed that all segments try to work together to formulate some sort of compromise on this legislation with give and take by all parties. This gave us an opportunity to clarify who would become a shipper in House Bill 1061, because the first draft of the bill, as some of you may know, would have allowed virtually anybody out of state to become a wine shipper. The original draft of the bill required a valid federal basic wine manufacturing permit. Sounds like a lot, and it seemed as though that added a lot of legitimacy to the legislation. In fact, though, obtaining such a permit from the feds, ATF, or the federal folks, is a cakewalk. Anybody can get one at no cost, and it's good for life and virtually meaningless. So when we met on February the 8th, at least the retail segment was grateful that the Revenue Department came in and offered a draft plan, along with some other recommendations of the department at that juncture, that closed that big loophole as to who could become a wine shipper under this legislation, and for that we're grateful. Now, it's been said that the Retail Association's opposition to some provisions of this bill could tear the three-tier system up in Georgia. I submit to you today, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, today we are asking that any one of the several members on this committee who have volunteered to either offer or to support amendments to this bill on behalf of the brick and mortar retailers in this state to drop those efforts. Because from here forward, we do not plan to further oppose this legislation. Gentlemen, I'm here on behalf of Georgia's brick and mortar retailers, and if our exuberance to best represent the interest is out of bounds, then we withdraw our stated objections. Up until now, this state has required accountable face-to-face retail transactions of beverage alcohol through a locally licensed brick and mortar seller, and our laws have provided for the best tax tracking methodology that you could ever ask for. In summary, however, we do ask that you take another look at some of the suggestions that were offered in that Revenue Department document, and that you will give them full support in attempting to enforce this bill if and when it does become law. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield the floor, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Legislative Council informed me there's some typographical or some changes that need to be made, and Sean, I'll turn it over to you to.
Manufacturer. And then my other suggestion would be that we do the same thing on line 23 on page 2, again striking the word person and adding underlined the word shipper. And that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any objection from the committee on changing those words around? No objections? Okay. We'll so incorporate them. Okay, we're down at the point of a motion to consider this bill. Do I hear a motion? Motion's in order. Do I hear a second? Got a motion and a second that this bill do pass. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign. Committee substitute to House Bill 1061 as amended goes out with a do pass recommendation. The next bill, the last on the list, is House Bill 1217, presented by Representative Jurgensen.
Second.
excuse me for that. No motion. All right. Recognize Representative Jurgensen. Excuse me for the interruption. They're over here trying to table it, but that ain't going to work. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, I bring before you today House Bill 1217. We're working off LC 284062ER. This is a bill that will license home inspectors in the state of Georgia. This committee is very familiar with the process that we have gone through over the past few years to license home builders and general contractors in the state, and this is the next logical progression of professionalizing the industry. In the bill, there's a few things that I would like to point out, and then in discussion with the Secretary of State's office to ensure it's transition appropriately, where we don't have some of the same issues that we've seen with the home license, or excuse me, the building industry and the contractors licensing. They've made some excuse me, they've made some recommendations that I think would be appropriate. On the bill, there's several things that I'd like to point out to you this afternoon. The first is that it will create a board, a state licensing board of home inspectors. This is on page 3, starting on line 9. The board will consist of 5 members, and of those 5 members, the bill currently reads that the 4 of them will be home inspectors, and it gives particular criteria of their experience for that. And 1 will be a community individual not associated with the home inspection industry. I'll come back to this, but I wanted to point that out to you. Some of the provisions in this bill that I think will help with the ease of the transition is that the board will be in place by December 31st, 2008. The bill, as written, would go into effect, and licensing would go into effect then July 1 of 2009. And I think this is one of the important things that we learned from the builder's licensing process, is that the board needs to be in place and functioning before the licensing goes into effect, and the rules promulgated to make sure that the transition is smooth and that the licensing occurs smoothly. Now, on those dates, in talking with the Secretary of State's office, it's my understanding that they don't have an issue with having the board established by December 31st, 2008, the end of this year, but might like to see an additional 6 months, January 1st, 2010, for the licensing to take effect. And in abundant caution, I would agree with that to ensure that we have don't have a duplication of the licensing, some of the licensing issues that we have seen with the builders. So if the chairman would indulge maybe a friendly amendment to that effect if you think it's so desired, but I'd leave that up to your discretion. On page 7, there were a couple of things that were put into this bill to ensure the integrity and ethics of the process. And let's see, line 9, number 2. It will be unlawful for a home inspector to perform or offer to perform for an additional fee any repairs to the structure on which the home inspector or home inspector's company has prepared a home inspection report. We certainly don't want folks to go out there and say that something is a deficiency and then offer to fix it for them, for obvious reasons. Also, in number 6, this is important to point out, line 23. This was brought forward by both the Home Inspector Association, Home Builders Association, and the General Contractor Association. In the course of performing a home inspection or preparing and presenting a home inspection report, it will be a violation to cite state minimum code unless the person holds a certificate in that code. And the reason that provision is in there is to ensure that if somebody is citing state minimum code, that they have the knowledge and the authority as a certificate holder. For example, if they're citing electrical code, that they have been certified, ICC certified in electrical code in the state of Georgia. And finally, on page 8, section 4339B-12. This code section here it basically gives a blueprint and a guideline of minimum basics that the report will contain, and the inspection will what will be consumed in the inspection, and what the home inspector may and may not do. So I think it's a pretty exhaustive bill, and I would like to, if the chairman will allow, I'd like for Tom, who worked extensively on this bill and through the process with Gork, to add anything that I might have inadvertently deleted.
Tom, I'll recognize you. Representative Jurgens, you'll stand by because there may be some questions that you'll need to answer, but I'll go ahead and recognize Tom Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tom Bauer, and I'm working with the 4 associations of home inspectors, all of whom have an expert witness here. If you have any questions, that would be the American Society of Home Inspectors, the National Association of Home Inspectors, the National Association of Certified Home Inspectors, and the Georgia Association of Home Inspectors. We have all come together and think that this is a very reasonable bill. I would like to point out, as Mr. Jurgensen said, that you know the process, and part of that process is that bills for licensure of professions that have not been licensed go through the Georgia Occupational Regulation Review Council. They are very thorough. They have some fairly strict criteria which are written into the law that you have to meet for them to come out with a positive recommendation. We were very pleased that I believe this is the first non-health group that Gork has actually given a seal of approval to, except for the real estate appraisers, which the federal government pretty much demanded by saying that if you were having a loan, that if you had a transaction that was backed by a federal loan, that the appraiser had to have training and education. So we were very pleased that Gork did feel that we had made the case. Some of the reasons that we're telling for that is that about 90% of the homes that are of our real estate contracts now have clauses dealing with inspections. And according to the Georgia Realtors Association, their estimates in 2006 were that 250,000 homes were sold, so that's 225,000 inspections. In recent years, the trend has been in the last eight or 9 years for, I think it was 12 more states to be licensed or certified. If you were to see fit to pass this, Georgia would join the 28 states that are basically licensing, although some of them are called certification or registration. It's pretty much tantamount to licensure. As Mr. Jurgensen said, all the other individuals dealing with the real estate transaction are regulated by the state. That would be the realtors, both agents and brokers, real estate appraisers, residential contractors, pest control, for instance. We have worked extensively with the various groups, some of whom you'll hear from today, to meet their concerns. I believe we have met the concerns of all who brought forward. I would like to maybe just point out a couple other things just for the benefit of the committee, so you will know. Basically, the systems that are inspected are in the definition section, which is on page 2, beginning on line 19. And then there is also a definition that distinguishes between a residential unit. We had some some clarification that we needed from the original bill. The engineers brought to us that they had some concerns that whether an inspector would be doing engineering when they look if they were working on a high-rise situation. So we have some very clear language in the bill that says that a home inspector can work on the individual unit within a high-rise, but only for those systems affecting the unit. So that would mean you could look at the circuit breaker box, for instance, for that unit, but you wouldn't have somebody going down in the basement and looking at the foundation of the whole building. All the states around us are licensure states, and the requirements, the basic requirements of this bill are on page, beginning at the bottom of page 4, which requires a course of study of 80 hours by a school approved by the board, or in lieu of that, 3 years experience with 100 home inspections, and also requires the passage of a valid examination. All of these things and the number of continuing education hours are consistent with the states around us and most of the states that license home inspectors. I don't want to belabor the point. We'll be happy to answer any questions if we could. Okay. Appreciate your favorable consideration.
Recognize Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Representative Jorgensen, whoever, there again, we've gone through this same thing on appointments. In here, you have the appointment be made by the governor and be ratified by the Senate. And I don't like that.
I understand, and I'm certainly open to any suggestions.
If I'd like to say one thing, and I'm not sure, but I believe the overall chapter 40, Title 43 deals with all the professions, Mr. Shaw, and I may be wrong, but I think that Chapter 1, which has all the common provisions, that is the provision for the...
Well, then it needs to be changed. I mean, that just takes us out of the picture.
Yes, sir, I understand.
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
All right.
How will this affect? We know now that banks and mortgage companies have their own inspectors, so-called, home inspectors. If they go out in order to look at a loan to value to make a loan, will they come under the home inspection? Okay.
There's a specific provision, and Mr. Ferguson's looking at it.
And some real estate companies has their own inspectors. Will this require them to go out and be?
I'm glad you asked that question because we want to point out first.
Yeah, I was just pulling this up. Hold on just a second, please.
Representative Shaw, if you will go to page 7, line 27 starts the section on the what folks are able to continue doing things, and number 2 addresses the first question you asked on line 31 about working for a bank.
Okay.
As to your other question regarding getting my ADD's kicking in here.
It doesn't mention realtor. It mentions banks and it mentions bank savings and loans.
There is another catch-all. Thank you, Keith. Mr. Hatcher's pointed out that the line 3 on page 8 basically is your general exemption for people who are already licensed.
Now, I apologize for that, but I hadn't had a chance to get all the way over to read that much. I got to page 6.
No problem. I'm glad you're looking at it, sir. But to answer your other question about the real estate company, when and it wasn't specifically addressed as a real estate company situation, but Gork did think there was a little bit of confusion. We wanted to make clear, and it says on, I'm not sure what line, that the business is not going to be licensed as a home inspection business, but there are requirements that whoever is doing home inspecting must be licensed unless they're a trainee, in which case they're accompanying a license.
And they would be under the same, if they've had 150 or more inspections in 3 years, they could apply for the license.
Yes, sir. As long as
one other provision there and I want to make this key point, all inspectors will be required to take the test, the certification test. You qualify to take the test by either having the experience or having the schooling, but you have to take the test. And that's a big difference than what we did with the home builders and the general
And who
contractor.
will administer the test, and what will it cost?
The board will make those decisions.
The board, there is, Mr. Shaw, there is a test out there now that I believe 20 states use, which is valid or reliable test, and the inspector actually pays the applicant pays the fee to take the test.
Thank you.
Representative Freeman.
I can't remember what it was now.
Okay, we'll just. Okay, the chair make this. Oh, excuse me. I'm gonna mention this in it. We've got two other persons to testify, and we need Keith Hatcher for Board of Realtors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard tonight. Usually time I'm going to try to be very, very brief. I want to thank Representative Jurgensen for bringing this legislation. Our association feels like it's long overdue to license home inspectors. As he mentioned, it's the one entity remaining within the process that's not licensed. And when you consider that the largest investment that Georgians make in a lifetime is their home, we think it's appropriate that that person giving that professional opinion have some education, experience, and testing before they render that decision. So we just want to respectfully urge your favorable consideration of this legislation.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You got a question? Or? Okay. Okay. You got a question? I'm sorry. Keith, you got a question from Representative Beard.
That's okay. I was just going to make sure this doesn't have anything to do with the parking lots, but that's a little inside joke. Thank you.
Okay, I think Representative Freeman's got one of you, Representative Jurgensen.
Can you tell me how many inspectors there are now?
Actually, Tom has that data.
Yes, sir. We have, of those four organizations I mentioned, the membership in those four organizations is about 1,000, and we figure estimates are from experiences in other states anywhere that same number would be unaffiliated or a little bit more, so maybe 2,000, 2,500, or 2,500 max.
Of those, I mean, do you anticipate them all passing the test?
Frankly, probably not, because we think there's some people out there who probably shouldn't be doing home inspections.
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we don't somehow create an issue where, are they overworked now, or are they underworked, or if we are going to lessen the number of inspectors, are we still going to be able to meet the demand?
Well, I will let these gentlemen, who are all home inspectors, answer whether they're overworked or underworked, because I know that how I feel about that, my wife would disagree with me, so I don't know. But they can talk about that.
Okay, we've got one other. You want to make a comment?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Representative Freeman, being on the building side of the business, it's my opinion that this is probably a great opportune time to do this, given the current state of the industry. It allows for the market, the free market, to work that self out. Once the licensing goes into effect and the building industry comes back, if there is undersupply, it will create a demand, and the free market will fill that. If there is an oversupply, the free market will correct that too, because livings will not be able to be made. So I think, to answer your question, what I've seen, I think there is an appropriate supply for the demand right now. And I see all three of these gentlemen shaking their head. I do not think that will create a vacuum. Right. I have no idea. I do know in the home builders licensing process, and I know the Secretary of State's office is here, we've issued approximately about 9 to 10,000 licenses, and we've turned down approximately 6,000 licenses. So that's about 40%. or actually about, yeah.
Two things, Mr. Freeman. One, you get a second shot at taking the test under the same application under this bill. And also, we think there's some situations where there are people who are expecting homes who've gotten, some training, but some of these fly-by-night schools, the ones that are not certified by the Georgia non-public post-secondary professional commission, something like that. And so I think what's going to happen is for these people to get the right education, and they'll probably won't have a problem with
Representative Freeman.
They can take the test twice on the same education, or do they have to go back for more education? And what happens after that final, if they fail the second test?
If they fail the second test, they have to wait a year. But they would not be able to take the test until they've gotten their 80 hours or show their 100 inspections and 3 years experience.
If they fail the second test?
Correct. They'd have to wait a year.
Okay, one more person wants to testify. Tom Leslie. Recognize you now, Mr. Leslie.
I'm Tom Leslie, and I represent the Engineers of Georgia, an umbrella organization of about 6 or 8 engineering associations. I know you all have never heard testimony in which one profession fussed about another getting in their mess kit. But it pleases me immensely to say that we do not have objection to the bill. We worked closely with them, appreciate the folks listening to us, and we believe this is a good bill, and we support its passage.
Thank you very much. Okay, Representative Jurgensen, I've heard comments that maybe the bill needs some amendments or something. Two amendments.
Yes.
You think we can get these accomplished today here, or do we need to get a subcommittee to work on? Are they?
I think they're very simple, and we can do it right now.
Okay. If you got the wordies, let's go ahead and propose your first amendment.
Okay. There'll be 4 places on the first amendment. It's just dates. Line 11, page 6.
Okay.
July 1st, 2009 needs to be changed to January 1st, 2010.
2010?
10, yes,
Okay.
sir. It's adding 6 months. Then on line 21, page 6, same thing. July 1st, 2009 changed to January 1, 2010. Line 26, same thing. And then on page 7, line 4, just the next page over, the same thing there.
All January 1
of 2010.
10.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that okay?
And then there's one other amendment that Jean Marie was working on, and this is something that we did put in the builder's licensing, and she's got the language, the builder's licensing, that this would go into effect upon the funding for the board, because there is per diem for the board, and we will be discussing this to ensure that that occurs with Chairman Harbin. And are you ready to go with that language?
Let me go ahead and get any objection to the amendment that's been offered on the change of the date. Anybody object to it? Okay, it's so adopted. Okay, Ms. Story, I'll let you give us the verbiage of what you recommend.
And I'll start with the caveat that in the short run, reading the right things, I'm not positive what was done for the board.
I understand.
For that board, but if you want to pass it with the same thing, you can adopt that. Otherwise, I can tell you what I think or at least what I think will effectuate its purposes. And that is, this act shall become effective only for the purpose of promulgating rules and regulations upon its approval by the governor or upon its becoming law without such approval. This act shall become effective for all other purposes only if funds are specifically appropriated for the purposes of this act and the General Appropriations Act making specific reference to this action shall become effective when the funds are so appropriated become available for.
Did everyone hear that and understand what the amendment does?
So essentially it would allow them to promulgate rules and regs now, but it can only become effective at some time.
Okay. Anyone have any objection to that amendment? Okay, I guess we need a motion to adopt it. No? Okay. Here a second? Okay. Any further discussion?
Representative Jurgensen, on page 3, line 21, you say after July the 1st, 2010, and that's subsequent to 1/1/2010.
I understand that. The reason that this only applies to the board, the whole intent was to get the board set up this year by 2008 so that they had adequate time to ensure that everything was in place and to make sure that they're working with the Secretary of State's office so that we did not repeat what we had some issues with builder's licensing. So this is completely independent time frames from when the act takes effect for licensing. So I'm still okay with these time frames, and so is everyone else from my understanding.
I have my problem is it just seemed like they would be leaders in the industry and they ought to be certified owner before anybody else.
Well, they can't be certified. That's why the requirements are a lot more stringent for those individuals to be on the board now. If you look at this starting on line 15 of page 3, the home inspector members who are initially appointed to the board shall have been actively engaged in the practice for 5 years and shall have performed a minimum of 500 inspections, 5 times the amount that it would be required to get licensed. So since nobody's licensed now, you've got to start with somebody, and that's the reason that those stringent requirements were put on there.
But they'd be making rules even though they're not.
I understand that, but I would consider this a compromise to ensure that the process is smooth, and these are the experienced professionals in the field, and I think it's appropriate. I have reviewed that many times, trust me. I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, and I guess the chair would entertain a motion. Do passed. I hear a second. Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the adoption of House Bill 1217 indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, like sign. Make one comment that I don't want to slight the Secretary of State's office. I know that they're concerned about this, and there may be some things in it that they need to address. I hope we would try to accommodate it by the starting dates and the appropriations and that sort of thing. So I don't mean to slice you in any way, and certainly work with you in any way to get this one going. But I think it's important that we make a step on it and get that rolling. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Being no other further business to come before the committee, I declare the committee meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your hard work.